North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. We report the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out each. Then I make commentary, and we debate all four. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. You can debate with us simply by going to the chat room that you can find on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or Twitch. Join us as you see fit. So far, winning the chat room derby is Gail Marlowe. Elisa Delosier is right behind her. Thanks very much for joining us. Sincerely appreciate it. This is a big day for former President Trump, as the hearing that we've been waiting for has essentially started and concluded. This from CNN. A federal judge held a hearing today to consider former President Donald Trump's bid for a special master to review the evidence the FBI seized at his Mar-a-Lago estate last month. The Justice Department has argued that the special master, a third-party attorney appointed to oversee part of a certain case, is unnecessary. And prosecutors pushed back at President Trump's legal claims that the executive privilege concerns warranted the appointment. Trump's lawyers argued the DOJ could not be trusted, as Trump claimed the search itself was unjustified. The department said, the DOJ said, that it said in court documents it believed that evidence collected at Mar-a-Lago will support its criminal investigation into the mishandling of federal records. The probe is also looking at the potential obstruction of justice. And so, what has happened at this particular moment is that federal judge Eileen Cannon, a Trump appointee, is the overseeing judge in the case. She was appointed to the federal bench by the former president in 2020, was confirmed by the Senate shortly after President Trump lost the 2020 presidential election. She graduated from the University of Michigan Law and told lawmakers during her confirmation process that her mother fled communist Cuba. Juan Antonio Gonzalez Jr. is the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. The Gonzalez name is one of two DOJ signatories that have been on all the filings and the submissions in both this case and the effort by various organizations to unseal certain warrant documents. It's been notable that no lower-level prosecutors from the office, so-called line attorneys, have been involved. They usually handle the day-to-day courtroom situations. They've been signing on to the public filed documents as well. Jay Bratt is the chief of counterintelligence at the DOJ's National Security Division. Bratt has played a prominent role in the litigation around the Mar-a-Lago filings after being the DOJ's point of contact with the Trump team over obtaining the documents from Mar-a-Lago. His name has joined Gonzalez's in the filings into the dispute over the releasing the warrant documents, and also argued on behalf of the DOJ in a hearing last month in the latter case. He has not entered an appearance. However, in the special warrant case, let's try this again. He has not entered an appearance, however, in the special warrant case being heard today. So it's unclear whether he will be present at the arguments. The arguments are over. And so now we'll find out at some point whether he showed up. Brad was also the DOJ attorney, joined by a handful of FBI agents who visited Mar-a-Lago June 3rd to retrieve classified documents that had been subpoenaed by a grand jury, an episode that was discussed at length in the DOJ response. Christopher Kise, a recent addition to President Trump's legal team, who entered his appearance in the case just this morning. Kise is a former Florida Solicitor General who served in Governor Ron DeSantis' transition team. Jim Trusty is also one of Trump's lawyers who has been handling matters related to classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. He is a former federal prosecutor. Trump's spokesman had previously touted Trusty's experience, saying that he has litigated some of the most complex cases in American history. He's done interviews in right-wing media, which is something that CNN has decided to highlight in their copy. Interviews with right-wing media, that's pointing out bias, in case you're wondering. Criticizing the FBI investigation and pledging to mount more legal challenges. Lindsay Halligan is another member of Trump's legal team. She said on Fox News, the Mar-a-Lago search may be the first step to tyranny in America. Earlier in the case, she bungled, they say. The former process of entering her appearance in the court docket was instructed by the court clerk to refile her paperwork and comply with local procedures. Oh, okay. Well, that's certainly newsworthy. A paperwork glitch is absolutely essential that we bring this up, especially where Donald Trump is concerned. Okay, so that's opinion, in case you're wondering. So, in this latest court filing, in an effort to investigate President Trump's handling of classified material, is a single tantalizing photograph showing an array of documents found on the property of former President's Florida resort. Today, taken by the FBI, the photograph shows several documents labeled with so-called classification markings. These government codes are designed to indicate the sensitivity of the information they refer to and the rules for how it is meant to be handled. So what ended up happening is that the hearing is now closed. U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon did not make a ruling from the bench. Now, as we come to this, we have to point out several different things. The things that we mainly have to discuss have to do with the fact that at this particular moment in time, I see things, this is my opinion again, I see things as the only way to true fairness in this case, the only way to stop the political persecution as opposed to a federal prosecution is to allow a court-appointed third-party special master to look through these documents and give what could or should be an objective viewpoint about what these documents mean, what they are, which belong to the president, and which don't. And so the DOJ says, yeah, you don't really have to do that. We have a taint team or a filter team that has already done this. We've got it all taken care of. Yeah, except once again, there are serious problems in all of this. Now, this leads to detective reasoning. It actually leads to reasoning of a logical matter in all of this. You've got to look at this and apply logic. First of all, if they had a case against President Trump, he'd already be indicted. No matter what they say or what is being reported or not reported. In my view, this president is such a lightning rod for federal action that had they had anything serious, they would have nailed him with it, or even unserious. They would have nailed him with it at their first possible opportunity. The other thing is this photograph. What is this photograph for? If these are so all-fired secret documents, why is a picture of them splattered all over every newspaper in the Western world and perhaps all around the world? Why would that be the case? In other words, somebody's not being honest here. And who is it? There are some problems with that picture that I have spotted that I don't think anybody has actually spent any time looking at. And I'm kind of surprised by that. And maybe what I can do is maybe I can show that to you here. Yeah, I can show that to you right here. Let me give this to you so that you can take a look at it. Now, let me see if I can make it any bigger. I think I might be able to. Let me see. Yeah. If you look at this, you'll notice, you can see my cursor here. It's very, very small. You see all this? These are top secret. They say top secret SCI. Okay. Well, what do those particular documents actually say? They can be top secret SCI, and the blanket statement is, well, it's some of the most important security information that there is in the United States. Well, that being said, why is there a picture of them splattered all over the entire world's newspapers and news outlets? There's also something else here. The story surrounding this is that this is how the president has been handling classified documents. Really? Most of us believe that what this is a carefully arrayed and staged photograph that proves the government's point that indeed there were classified materials still left in Mar-a-Lago. What fascinates me about this is this one right here. By the way, they say that this was President Trump just being a slob. But let's take a look at that from a standpoint of what kind of a slob the president actually was. You see this paper right here? See this one right here? You see that? You'll notice that the cover page is opened. The cover page is open. And of course, the document itself with these little white blobs, this is obviously photoshopped, these little white blobs cover everything. So we are supposed to believe that the President of the United States scattered these documents all over the floor in some room of Mar-a-Lago. And oh, by the way, one of these pages, one of these documents was opened. And if you'll notice, this is looks like it was freshly opened. That's kind of interesting right there. Nobody's pointed this stuff out. Why haven't they pointed this out? And I'm talking about the people that are supposed to be looking at this from a standpoint of, hey, we want to see what's actually in the picture. Nobody's pointed this out. This was an obviously staged photograph. Okay, for what reason? Why was it obviously staged? Well, to try to put some kind of a spin on the circumstance that President Trump just doesn't know how to handle classified documents. And of course, the typical story is, hey, we're now doing assessments to find out how much damage was done to national security because these these top secret SCI documents were in the handling of President Trump. Now, what they also didn't think about when they're bringing that narrative forward is the Secret Service guards that entire complex. It was behind locked doors. They asked for a bigger lock. President Trump's team accommodated that. They knew where these documents were. They knew what they were. The president has been cooperative at every step of the way, and that's demonstrated. They even said so in this affidavit that supposedly allowed the search in the first place. This is for public consumption. This picture right here, is for public consumption and nothing more. Now, I have a few things that I've got to point out here. First of all, if you're going to go after a former president, you need to be as completely transparent as you possibly can. The comedy surrounding the actual affidavit that was supposed to show probable cause but did not, was supposed to show what laws had been broken but did not, was supposed to show intent, the subject of this search warrant willfully blah, 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 but did not, is so heavily redacted as to be nearly useless. So if you're going after the president, a former president of the United States for the first time in American history in his private residence, don't you think you probably ought to be open and honest about it unless you can't be open and honest about it? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Please do call me and tell me what you think. Tell me about that document that was obviously staged to be open. What about that? And whose bright idea was that? If you're the FBI, you'd expect that when you're trying to frame somebody, you'd be really, really good at it. But that doesn't look like that's the case. This is the Wells Report. More in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We're reviewing what's been going on with a special master hearing that happened in a South Florida federal courtroom today. Judge Eileen Cannon has yet to rule. As soon as she does, we will let you know what that ruling is regarding the appointment of a special third party to oversee a scrub or a look through of all the documents taken by the FBI. I wish that special master would also take a look at the original documents returned in January. There are all kinds of problems with this, logical ones, as I said before. Specifically, the FBI knew that there were more documents in Mar-a-Lago. They knew that in June, July, August. And suddenly, the reason that they said they had to move with so much speed and so much urgency was because the president might have had the nuclear codes, which, by the way, would be useless insofar as they change every day and every week based on what kind of codes they're talking about. I mean, I know that. That's an open source. I mean, I don't suppose that everybody would go hunting around for those kinds of things, but when you're a news-based talk show, you really got to sort of do your homework, and I sort of kind of done my homework. But suddenly, they go in there, they get everything. What happened to the nuclear papers? What happened to the nuclear documents? Oh, well, they're too secret to be able to talk about. How convenient. How many of those top secret SCI, and this is another problem, the logic problem that they have to deal with, how many of those top secret SCI documents deal with the Russia collusion hoax? How many of those are in there? So it depends on what kind of material you're looking at with regards to top secret SCI. There are an awful lot of people that believe that maybe this whole thing had nothing to do with nuclear codes, but rather had to do with exculpatory information about the Mueller investigation and this whole Russia collusion hoax. That's what most people that are basically opining like me, I just was, by the way, that's what they're saying. What does that say? That closes the book on a political DOJ and a political FBI. The FBI has a real problem with their reputation. When it comes to Donald Trump, they have essentially manufactured evidence, sort of like that picture I just showed you. They've manufactured evidence. They have altered emails in order to get search warrants for monitoring the phones, wiretap warrants, to monitor the phone of Trump campaign officials. Why doesn't that create a Watergate mess for everybody involved? Well, because the same people that turned the Watergate mess into the resignation of President Richard Nixon are the people that are trying to run Donald Trump off the political road. Once again, it's quite all right if you're Hunter Biden and setting aside 10% for the big guy. But nobody wants to know anything about that. What we want to know, I'm being sarcastic, what they want to know is what they can nail President Trump with. A lot of people are wondering, so how long will it take for the FBI to recover their reputation? Maybe never. Maybe never. It wouldn't be the first time that politics brought down something incredibly important, like a presidency. So is politics going to be the end of the FBI as we know it? There are agents that have finally had enough that are flooding Congress, so much so that Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, reminded those people that they cannot approach Congress people or senators without going through legislative affairs first. What are they trying to hide? If you don't have anything to hide, why are you working so hard at it? This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Support the report. How can you do that? Well, we, from time to time, like a lot of news sources, for example, The Guardian, this news broadcast exists primarily as something that is on its own. This is an independent news broadcast. And we don't have monetary support from anybody except you. Most of the people in my career that have made me successful, and I'm talking about the vast majority, somewhere in the order of 99+%, are listeners, people like you. And the management that I worked with was sketchy. Some were very, very, very good. I've worked for giants, but I've also worked for not giants. But we don't have that kind of financial support. If you feel like providing some of it, support the report. Go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. $1 will do it. $1 a month? I think this broadcast is worth $1 a month. So maybe you do too. So go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. There you can also toss in $2 a month. You can toss in $5 a month, whatever you want to, but make it easily affordable. For a cup of coffee, you can get real news, truthfully reported, the pointing out of bias and fact. Not that there's much fact in news these days. And you can also debate. You can debate for free, obviously, and people do. The chat room is flying today. But what I would suggest is that maybe this show is worthwhile. If you believe it is, share it with your friends. Also hit the subscribe button. I was looking at the subscribers on Facebook. We got a lot of people that follow this broadcast. Thank you very much. Head over to patreon.com. Patreon.com, patreon.com/The Wells Report, and put your money where my mouth is. So on August 11th, Adam Buys logged on to his account on a chat room or a chat service called Gab and started typing. I sincerely believe that if you work for the FBI, then you deserve to die. That is a quote from Adam Buys. He's 46. He was an aspiring freelance photographer who had filled his website with action photos of fast cars and outdoor sports. Sounds like my kind of guy. He had been fired from his day job in marketing for refusing the COVID-19 vaccine. He wrote online and had struggled in his efforts to file an unemployment claim. Just how far does that deep state go? I wonder. As federal prosecutors would later describe in court filings, Buys was filling his days posting under a pseudonym on Gab, a social media service popular with right-wing extremists. I wonder who decided he was a right-wing extremist. Of course, that quote is pretty stupid. I sincerely believe that if you work for the FBI, then you deserve to die. Well, that's a loose statement. And probably would get scrutiny, but apparently they arrested him for it. His post included a link to a Fox News story about FBI Director Christopher Wray decrying the wave of violent threats directed at the agency in the 3 days since the search of former President Donald Trump's home and Club Mar-a-Lago. He compared federal agents to Nazi forces. He fumed about police state scum, and he composed what might have been a final plan. He said this, quote, I already know I'm going to die at the hands of these law enforcement scumbags. My only goal is to kill more of them before I drop, unquote. That's an outright threat. It's an outright threat. But remember, he's posting under a pseudonym on essentially a social media site. 4 days later, warrant in hand, armed federal agents and SWAT teams surrounded Buys' home near a tumbling waterfall in the deep forest hunting country of western Pennsylvania. Inside the house were Buys and his 12-year-old son. It was dark. It was near midnight. Officers called Buys on his cell phone over and over, 16 times in all. They issued orders through a loudspeaker to surrender. Finally, Buys emerged carrying an assault rifle. Officers ordered him to put down the weapon. In those 4 days between Buys' threatening posts and the moment he faced off with armed agents, he'd been snared by a complex, little-known practice within the FBI called social media exploitation, or SOMEX. one that might at this moment be monitoring the online activities of you. Top FBI leaders sought to downplay the extent to which agents can legally monitor public online activities of people who aren't under investigation. But in reality, the Bureau can conduct almost unlimited monitoring of public-facing social media as long as it's doing so for law enforcement purposes. Experts say that gives the FBI more power than it has been willing to acknowledge publicly, power the Bureau and other security experts say they have a responsibility to use to prevent terrorism. Critics say social media exploitation also means agents are allowed to review online posts at will, with no oversight, yet vast enforcement authorities. FBI officials have put out a lot of misinformation about the scope of their activities, said Michael German, a former FBI special agent and fellow with the New York University Brennan Center for Justice. The FBI has tremendous powers to investigate long before there's a reasonable criminal predicate. SOMEX involves agents who develop their own leads and receive information from a network of contractors and collaborators, such as Terrorism Research Group that just flagged the post by buys. But the Bureau has been criticized for how its investigators have reacted, as in the case of the online post made by liberal activists during the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020, and how they failed to react. I just have to ask you at this point, do you suppose that any of those people involved with BLM activities were perhaps living a life that might put them in the same exact circumstance as Mr. Adam Buys? I'm just asking. So what we have is once again, some of this two-stage law systems, this two-stage legal system or justice system, if you will. You know, it's one thing to have rules for President Trump and different rules for Hillary Clinton, rules for President Trump and rules for Hunter Biden, different ones. And people will sit there and go, well, that doesn't really affect me. Well, it really does affect you. Strangely enough, I happen to believe that posting on social media is free speech. Now, you obviously can't say things like, I'm going to kill a bunch of FBI agents before they kill me. That's a terroristic threat. I don't know what they charged this guy with yet. But there's something inescapable here. Something inescapable that we have to discuss. Internal records obtained by one advocacy group appear to show agents in cyber research specifically focusing on anti-police and racial justice rallies instead of armed counter-protesters or white supremacists. For example, the other day, Antifa, which is actually should be renamed Pro-Fa, as opposed to Pro-Fa, because they are absolute fascists, showed up to provide security at a trans LGBTQ event, and they were armed. I'm trying to remember when the last time I can remember the Proud Boys or Oath Keepers doing the same thing. Trying to figure out what that's all about, but yet somehow they escape scrutiny. How is that? By the way, when I read that report, nobody really mentioned that they were carrying assault-style rifles. That's something interesting, too. Because in this article right there, they absolutely point that out. The problem with social media surveillance is often the problem with policing at large, which is the police cannot predict crime. All they can do is make an assessment of what type of person is most likely to commit crime and put that group under surveillance. This according to Matthew Guerrilla, a police analyst at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. That knee-jerk reaction, Guerrilla said, ends up meaning more surveillance and harassment of people of color and marginalized groups. Marginalized groups like what? Right-wing extremists? Right-wing MAGA supporters? Because the President of the United States has called people who believe in MAGA philosophy fascists. So does that give more license or less license to the FBI to follow this stuff around? And you can't get away from that crazy thing, that bugaboo that they didn't do it with BLM. There's plenty of chatter out there from BLM sources, but how come they haven't been arrested? How come we haven't heard about it if they had been arrested? Just exactly why is that? So this dual stage, this dual tier legal system, at some point will turn its baleful eye on you, it appears. So suddenly, does that bring that home to you at all? Does that bring that home? You know, once again, what we have here is the FBI arresting and prosecuting a guy for something that might happen. Let me ask you another question. Is it okay to prosecute somebody for something that might happen? Now, this guy's got a loose mouth. I don't know what he was trying to get done. And as I have told you, any threats against any law enforcement is something that I wholeheartedly condemn. I wholeheartedly condemn it. In fact, the response to this kind of thing, the response that people are saying, my goodness gracious, Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, said the other day, he said, you know, if they prosecute President Trump, if they indict him, there are going to be riots in the streets. There better not be. There shouldn't be. If there are riots in the streets, what has to happen is that we have to make sure that those people who support President Trump and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are not on national news brandishing weapons and threatening to kill FBI agents. Remember, I discussed a few days ago, you can go back in the collection on Patreon or Facebook and YouTube, and you can hear about the Nothing Revolution. The Nothing Revolution. And that's where, in response to tyranny, oppression, etc., you do nothing. You don't go to work. You don't pay taxes. You don't do anything. You just stay home. You don't shop. You don't buy gasoline. Now, that takes preparation. I don't know when the Nothing Revolution is going to happen. But there are 74 million people that have been called fascists by the sitting president of the United States. What would the country look like if all of us just stayed home? If we didn't show up in the public square with weapons and so on. If all we showed up with was an American flag and the Constitution in numbers, what would they arrest us for? Again, if you take part in the Nothing Revolution, are they going to come to your door and force you to go to work? You know, as a matter of fact, I would not take part in the Nothing Revolution because I'd be reporting on it from this studio, just as I'm doing now. So I'm not somebody that believes that violence is the way to any solution in any way, shape, or form, unless that solution is, I don't know, somebody breaking down your door in the middle of the night, unannounced, for no reason whatsoever. You see, I have a completely different idea about how stuff like that should be handled. The FBI has a pretty checkered past, and other law enforcement agencies around the country they have a pretty checkered past when it comes to inventing crime so that they can prosecute people that they have political issues with. Most notably, of course, the kidnapping attempt by these 6 guys from Michigan who had FBI informants scattered all through their group, egging them on. 4 were released because it was entrapment. 2, there was sincere and serious evidence against, and they're going to jail. I'm okay with that. But I do have a problem with the prosecution of these other 4 guys. Ruby Ridge all got started because Randy Weaver decided not to buy an 18-inch sawed-off shotgun. Then, of course, there's the Waco raid. You know, I had a completely different idea about the Waco raid. Show up in one of those really slick FBI sedans, get out with a search warrant, walk up to the door, knock, Say, hi, I'm Special Agent John Wells, and this is my friend, Special Agent Bill Wells. We're not related. Hey, listen, I've got this search warrant. We need to come in and look at the premises. Would you mind? And if they say no, you say, okay. And do you then roll in the tanks and the SWAT teams and the people crawling on the roof and so on and so forth? No. No, you start building a fence around the entire compound. That's what you do. And you put a sign out front that says the David Koresh Federal Correction Institution. Believe me, they'd start coming out immediately. They absolutely would. But no, they decided to go in with tanks ablazing and so on and so forth, set fire to the place and burn everybody to death. And they're watching us and our social media. This is the Wells Report. More in just a moment. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report coming to you from a stormy studio in far north Fort Worth, Texas. Fort Wells Keller Studios, in fact. Glad you're here. So let's review what we've just discussed regarding the FBI and social media. There is a team that watches it all the time. What you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You are essentially testifying against yourself when you make threatening statements on social media. But that's not all they're watching. They're watching everyone else too. Seriously? Now, we've known for a long time that everything that's electronically transmitted around the United States and elsewhere finds a home in gigantic server farms scattered across the country, one of them the Federal Data Hub in Utah. All this stuff is available, categorized by your name and your social security number. So much for the national ID number. All they have to do is essentially go in there and sift through all of the evidence that they have, looking for something that they can base some kind of crime on. The Stasi had the same thing in East Germany. It really didn't make any difference whether you said anything provocative or not. Everything you did was carefully noted and filed. It finally got to the point where they had so much information on so many people living in East Germany, they couldn't sift through it all to find out anything about any of these people. It imploded under its own weight, sort of like what socialism does. But with the Federal Data Hub, that's not a problem. They can find you in the blink of an eye. And everything that you've said, everything that you've written. In this particular case, we know this guy was posting under a pseudonym. How did they pierce the personal information of that guy? How did they find it? I'm sure they had an arrest warrant. I'm sure they had a search warrant to go through that guy's electronic media and check everything out. Well, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe that's another set of affidavits and search warrants we need to see. And since they watch everybody else, I have to point out something that my dear departed mother once told me. Just because I'm innocent doesn't mean I don't have rights. There was some fascinating give and take regarding some of this. There was a question and answer situation with Christopher Wray. From Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, we know the attacks were planned on January 6th out in the open on popular social media platforms. Does the FBI regularly include social media monitoring as a part of its efforts to combat violent extremism? Christopher Wray replied, "We have very specific policies that have been in the department for a long time that govern our ability to use social media. And when we have an authorized purpose and proper predication, there's a lot of things we can do on social media, but what we can't do on social media is, without proper predication and an authorized purpose, just monitor." Well, they just do. That was an inaccurate statement. Months earlier, the FBI's former executive assistant director for national security, Jill Sanborn, gave similar explanations to the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. Quote, "We cannot collect First Amendment protected activities without sort of the next step, which is intent," unquote. Senator Kirsten Sinema then followed up by saying, "So does the FBI not monitor publicly available social media conversations?" Sanborn replied, quote, "Correct, ma'am. It's not within our authorities." Sounds pretty good so far, doesn't it? Well, the problem with that is the FBI's own rules say otherwise. This, by the way, from USA Today. FBI officials told USA Today that Wray's statement was correct while acknowledging that an authorized purpose means simply doing anything in line with the duties of an FBI special agent. That authorized purpose is actually extraordinarily broad, sort of like the search warrant for Mar-a-Lago. Policy would forbid agents from looking at social media to, for example, keep tabs on a romantic partner or monitor for some other non-law enforcement use. But it would also allow an agent to look at essentially anything online proactively if the intent was to stop a crime or keep Americans safe. An FBI official called this falling within the penumbra of national security, enforcement of federal law, or foreign intelligence. You would call it something else. Domestic spying. That's what you'd call it. German is a fellow with the Brennan Center for Liberty and National Security, argued in a recent report that individual FBI agents have extraordinary leeway to look through public-facing social media posts without seeking authorization from their superiors in advance or even keeping an official record of their actions. The FBI rules, laid out in the agency handbook and periodically updated, allow agents to conduct, quote, pre-assessments of possible threats. Pre-assessments. In other words, the surveillance state can look at you for any reason that they choose for a pre-assessment. Anything you can say, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. There's only one problem with that. Those come from the Miranda rights that you are given after you've been arrested. Has anybody told you that before you were arrested? Has anybody told you that everything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law when it's actually the court of social media? Are you okay with that? Yes or no? Why? 817 379 2172. I've got nothing to hide. Just because you have nothing to hide doesn't mean you don't have rights guaranteed by the Bill of Rights in the U.S. Constitution. This is the Wells Report. Back for hour number 2 in just a moment. North to south, coast to coast, around the world, this is the Wells Report. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out each. We make commentary. That's not the news. And we debate everything we say on this broadcast. That's the invitation. I hope you take us up on it. It is the Wells Report. About that commentary, just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. I differentiate between news reporting and opinion. Something nobody else does that does this job. I do. I would like you to consider supporting this broadcast, because right now, my wife is supporting it. And her days of subsidizing the Wells Report need to come to an end. So please help me out with that. Put your money where my mouth is. Support the report. Go to patreon.com/the Wells Report and make a donation. $1 will do it. $1 a month? That might be worth it. Might be worth having a access to, say, for example, a news broadcast in real time that you can respond to simply by giving us a call. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172, or join us on the chat room. Join us on a chat room. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about the President of the United States, who in a speech earlier this week called 74 million Americans fascists. He's going to do it again, this time in Philadelphia. And the question is very simple. Is President Biden someone who chooses to unite the people of the United States or divide the people of the United States? From USA Today, President Joe Biden will argue democracy is at stake amid rising threats of political violence. It's going to happen tonight in a speech, less than 70 days before the midterm election. He is expected to deliver remarks at 8 p.m. Eastern Time outside the Independence National Historical Park in Philadelphia in what will be the president's second round of 3 trips to Pennsylvania, a crucial Senate battleground over a one-week stretch. President Biden has been more combative. Apparently that exercises his base. What he's been combative about is started to be his political opposition. Now it's turning to the people of the United States. Although the speech is not considered a campaign event, it comes as President Biden is embarking in on a travel blitz to multiple battleground states, including Ohio, Wisconsin, in addition to Pennsylvania. A new President Biden is emerging, one more willing to attack Democrats, make that Republicans who deny 2020 election results, remaining aligned with former President Donald Trump, and are criticizing the FBI amid its investigation into classified documents found at Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. President Biden introduced a new combative rhetoric line at a Democrat fundraiser and rally in Maryland last week, accusing, quote, MAGA Republicans of semi-fascism. He called Republican attacks on the FBI sickening in a fiery speech Tuesday in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and called out Republicans who refused to condemn the January 6th attack on the Capitol. For God's sakes, whose side are you on? Asks the president, unquote. An NBC News poll last week found that 21% of voters said threats to democracy were the top issue facing the country above the economy, immigration, and climate change. Philadelphia is known as the birthplace of American democracy, and where President Biden launched his 2020 presidential campaign. The president is expected to reintroduce the central argument of his 2020 run by framing the stakes as the continued battle for the soul of the nation. So let's spend a couple of moments going through all of this. President Joe Biden is going to argue that democracy is at stake. Strangely, more people are voting in elections than ever have. That seems like democracy. More people are speaking out than ever have before. That seems like the First Amendment. And rising threats of political violence, we should all decry them, but we should decry all of them instead of just those from your political opposition, Mr. President. And you do not. You simply don't. And so what I would say is, what I would postulate is that democracy isn't at stake. Democracy is vibrant and brilliant and wonderful in the United States of America, no matter what President Biden says. What is at stake is democracy. Democracy is different than democracy. In democracy, the First Amendment only applies to those people who agree politically with the American left and Democrats, hence the term democracy. The democracy can be easily spotted. There is the administrative state. There is the law enforcement state. There is the deep state. There is the surveillance state. And these are all creatures of democracy. Now, make no mistake, the Republican Party is feckless. It can't do anything to actually stop any of this unless we all vote for them. Boogeyman politics has been part and parcel of the Republican campaign strategy for decades. But the simple case of the matter is when they actually get the mission that the voters believe they are about to undertake, they don't undertake it. They find ways to avoid responsibility. They look at each other with knowing glances and say, well, there's a bigger process at play here. We're going to let the Democrats destroy the nation so that we can come in and fix it. The only real problem with that logic is that you wait for the destruction of the republic before you fix it, and you call yourself Republicans. That gets me on a soapbox having to do with the fact that conservative thought in the United States is not enjoying good stewardship by the Republican Party. The only person that cares about true stewardship of freedom, liberty, and God-given rights seem to be President Trump and his 74 million supporters. But that makes us all fascists, which is even more egregious than what makes us all racists, makes us all deplorables. No, this is going down a very dangerous road that says your political opponents and people who support them are domestic terrorists. How convenient. How convenient. In the meantime, the government of the people, for the people, by the people is turning into government of the left, for the left, by the left. And so, the president is about to embark in a screed. And that's called by USA Today as a more combative Biden. I would say a more hysteric Biden. A more panicking Biden. Because indeed, it is not democracy, it is democracy. Democrats are fighting for their very political lives, and they should be. Nestled within them is a socialist cabal that can only see an entire state run by their own ilk. And they'll do anything, up to and including arresting people at the crack of dawn, throwing them in leg irons. In the meantime, these people that they are arresting have been cooperating with the authorities at every turn, sort of like President Trump, in my opinion. There may be something that comes out of this, and I'll look forward to seeing it. I'll also look forward to reporting it. But the well-worn path of going after Donald J. Trump is littered with overzealous, hysterical failure. And not just on the part of politicians. No, the deep state shows up here. The deep state becomes an ever more important part of life here in the United States. No. No, it shouldn't. No, it mustn't. There are an awful lot of people in the United States, as the president points out, that deny the 2020 election results. And he says that, my God, we should attack those people that believe that the 2020 election was somehow an aberrant abuse, an aberrant fixing of the democratic process in the United States. Not the Democratic Party process, that's doing just fine. But all of these horrific statements about voter suppression and fascism and so on and so forth, no, that's designed to make it okay for the FBI to go after people posting on social media under a pseudonym. How'd they find that guy? Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Where's the Fifth Amendment? You're not supposed to testify against yourself. How is it that people are testifying against themselves and actually losing in court? How is that? Such is the state of the surveillance state. And who's responsible for it? President Biden is responsible for it. Did he set it all up? No, it was set up by President Obama. The weaponization of the American Penal Code, the actual U.S. code, the weaponization of executive branch agencies, IRS, FBI. For crying out loud, the FTC, EPA got called down by the Supreme Court of the United States. I certainly hope they start looking at other executive branch agencies for the same kind of miscreancy they nailed the EPA with. There are all kinds of things that we must do to protect democracy. None of them has anything to do with calling half of America and half of the people of the United States domestic terrorists, racists, and fascists. Getting back to the 2020 election, how many people does it take in the United States to motivate its own government to stop pushing people away, saying that you're just a racist, bigoted, fascist, lousy human being for not believing in the 2020 election, before you actually investigate the 2020 election? How come we haven't actually investigated it? No, wait, they did an audit of the votes. Right, but they essentially took what had happened after the crime and audited what was left after the crime as opposed to before the crime. There's another election right now. It just happened. Sarah Palin was running to fill and run the rest of a deceased Congress member in Alaska. The Democrat won, even though in the essential law of the jungle primary, the top 4 vote getters get to go to this runoff election. You know how she won it? Mail-in ballots. Really? Mail-in ballots, huh? Am I saying that the election is rigged? No. I'm saying we ought to investigate it. And everybody says, my God, if you don't believe in that, then you don't believe in democracy. How convenient. No, go prove your point. Go prove that you're absolutely right. No, we don't have to. Yes, you do have to. This is America. This is also the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report, hour number 2 on September 1st, year of our Lord 2020. Thanks for joining us today. So, the President of the United States is about to make a speech in Philadelphia this evening. If it's anything like his other speeches, it will be an hysteric screed against Republicans and people who support Republicans, because that's what he's been doing, including this week. Thought it was especially amusing when he said, you know, all these people that think they're protecting Americans and Americans' freedom, if they're gonna fight the country, they're gonna need F-15s. Some very nice person went back in the archives. He said that before and also added nuclear weapons. He somehow left out the nuclear weapons part. So we need F-15s and nuclear weapons to fight off the country? Really? We need F-15s and nuclear weapons to fight off the country. The Second Amendment of the United States exists so we can do exactly that. It's constitutional. So what's the president talking about? He wants to paint the Republican Party and Republicans in general, you and me, 74 million people who voted for President Trump in 2020, as extremists. Which of the two parties that you currently listen to on endless reams of newscasts, which of those two parties is extremist? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Let me ask you another question. Since the president's approval rating is now dipped below 40 again, that happened today, it's in the 30 percentile. And why is it that 21% of the people that listen to President Biden actually believe what he's saying, and yet he continues to say it? Even with my shaky math, I realize that that's 79% of Americans who don't believe what he says. 79%. So he calls everybody that disagrees with him a fascist, a deplorable, sexist, racist, domestic terrorists, fascists. He calls all of it. How do you actually win an election that way? Well, I'm going to tell you how. I'm going to tell you how. But I'm going to wait for a couple of minutes because I've got to at least leave an opportunity to pay more bills. So the simple case of this is, what is the strategy here going after an ever-shrinking shred of the American population? Ever more screedy, ever more hysterical, ever more willing to throw out comparisons to his fellow Americans that lead inexorably to the fascists that killed 6 million people during the Second World War. At least 6 million. Does he honestly believe that his fellow Americans are of that ilk? If so, what does that say about him? What does it say about President Biden himself? Oh, I don't have to worry about it. I've got 81 million votes. We'll see next time. We'll see next time, Mr. President. We'll see how many votes you get next time. Bet you it's not 81 million. So why is the president doing this? What is the motive for this? Why is somebody so willing to infuriate 74 million Americans? Why is he so willing to do so in what is a concerted effort to win in 2022? What does he know that we don't know? Why is this ever more, extreme political philosophy something that's on the lips of President Biden so far every day this week? I have some thoughts. Let's see if they withstand your scrutiny. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news, analysis, commentary, and debate. The debate can be found at 817-379-2172. You can also join the chat room. So President Biden got 80 plus million votes, actually 81 million votes. So if he runs again and he gets, let's say, 90 million plus votes, can we the people say fraud? I'm just asking because I'm asking. See, what I like to do is I like to look at the basics. I'm not into conspiracy theories. I just like to look at basic facts. So 74 million people voted for President Trump, the largest number of votes for a sitting president in American history. But Joe Biden got 81 million and won the election. So in other words, since President Obama got 67 million the first time and 65 or 63 or 65 million the second time, the real political powerhouse in the Obama-Biden administration was Joe Biden. So arguably, President Obama rode President Biden's coattails. Does that make sense? I don't know. Let me give you another one. 74 million vote for President Trump, 81 million vote for President Biden. That's 155 million votes. In the 2010 census, which would be the census in play during the 2020 election, that means that 95% of the registered voters in the United States voted. 95%. That's never happened. Well, let's use the 2020 numbers. Well, there were some 201 million registered voters in 2020. That means it was a 75% turnout. See, I like basic things. So the President of the United States says, my gosh, the way people are in America, they're racist and they're homophobic and, well, actually, as Gary said, everything-ophobic. I'm just going to use that, Gary. Thanks. We're everything-ophobic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're fascists now, and domestic terrorists, and extremists. Take a look at the two parties. Take a look at the Democrat Party, which is saturated with socialists, communists, and essential totalitarians. Would you say that's more extreme than, say, for example, a group of people that say, let's make America great again? So let me get back to basics. This president is going to speak tonight. He's going to talk about how terrible ultra mega is. You see, in my view, a group of people that want to make America great again and are strident about it are called patriots, not domestic terrorists, and certainly not fascists. And so what ends up happening is that you see the President of the United States going after ever-shrinking groups of people. Now it's LGBTQ. Something along the lines of, 10% of the American people, which is a lavish estimate. But let's just say 10% because my math sucks. That's 10%. So he can count on the 10% vote. Okay. And since he's actually pointed out that if you don't vote for him, you ain't black, that gives us the black population in the United States somewhere south of 13%. But let's give him 13%. So that's 23% of the American vote. 23%. How is he going to get the votes he needs? Tonight, he's going to once again, according to all popular estimates, he's going to call out 74 million Americans as domestic terrorists and fascists. Is he going to win more votes with a speech like that or lose more votes with a speech like that? I don't know how long it's going to take before the non-totalitarian Democrats and the Democrat Party finally reach the conclusion that they're under just as big a threat as these so-called ultra MAGA Republicans, especially in plain sight of what is a radical and extremist political party, certainly in the progressives and by association, the Democrat Party. So once again, let's keep getting back to basics. Are you going to win more votes, Mr. President, or lose more votes? I would say he's going to lose more votes. So why would he go out there and say something that is deliberately inflammatory and, oh, by the way, hurtful and divisive in an effort to win the 2022 election? Well, my logic dictates it's because he's not concerned about whether or not he's going to lose the election. Why isn't he worried about losing the election? Does he know something about the election process that we don't know? Like, for example, maybe there's some flim-flammery going on that he doesn't have to worry about it, so he can indulge his leftist political delirium? Is that why he's doing it? So why would that be? Oh, we don't have to worry about people voting. We got the votes. Excuse me? 74 million voted against him, and yet he doesn't have to worry about votes? What does that tell you? Once again, I'm just asking questions. And so the President of the United States thinks the fix is in. There's another reason why the president is doing this. Let's look at his legislative achievements. He just spent $1.7 trillion. And he says it's all bought and paid for because we don't have to worry about it because of this vaporous and somewhere out of nowhere $1 trillion reduction in the budget deficit. Actually, he said it was $1.7 trillion. He just spent $1.7 trillion. And then he did the college tuition forgiveness thing. That's $2.3 trillion. Actually, yes, depending on who you talk to. It could be as much as $2.7 trillion. Which, by the way, is according to the original estimate, it was $300 billion. Which is $2,079 for every taxpayer in the United States. Those are fresh numbers with the 2020 census data. There are 3 people living in this house. We're all taxpayers. So it's certainly not because of fiscal policy. In Wilkes-Barre the other day, the president decried how terrible fentanyl is. It's just plain awful. It's just terrible, and we've got to do something about it. Okay, Mr. President, where does the fentanyl come from? This flood of this evil, horrible chemical that kills. Where's it coming from? The southern border. Children, people overdosing on fentanyl, 1 million strong, and the border is still open, which is the, if not primary, the only source of fentanyl coming into the nation. So we can't talk about fentanyl. And while we're on the subject of the southern border, we are given assurances that the southern border is secure. Oh. Well, if the southern border is secure, then why is President Biden now building the holes in the Arizona border wall? Is he trying to make it more secure? Or is he trying to save Senator Mark Kelly's job? Well, because the Senate's in play. Yeah, the Senate's in play. So it's not the southern border. It's not fiscal responsibility. Is it because of the way he handles foreign policy? Is that it? Well, then there's that Afghanistan thing where we undercut every ally we had ever enlisted in help with the war on terror. We just left. So it's not his foreign policy. By the way, China is the biggest threat to the United States right now. And what's he doing about China? Nothing. Nothing. Well, he did sail 2 cruisers through the Taiwan Straits, which, by the way, surprised me. Good for you, Mr. President. Now put a couple of carrier battle groups right there to protect Taiwan. Let's do that. So what's he running on? He's running on the degradation, the denigration, the destruction of 74 million votes, 74 million hard votes just from a couple of years ago. He's going to denigrate those people, according to all the reports I've read. He's going to denigrate those people and somehow manage to stop this theoretical red wave that seems pretty much an open and shut case unless you talk to Republican leadership like Mitch McConnell, who says, not so fast there. You got us. Not so fast. The Senate is a different kind of an animal. We just don't have quality candidates. What do you mean we don't have quality candidates? So what are you saying, Mr. McConnell, what are you saying? Oh, you're saying that the Republican voters who voted for these candidates are making bad decisions. Is that what you're saying? Not sending you enough quality candidates? Well, no. Why should we go support a non-quality candidate? What gives you the ego problem so incredibly advanced, Senator McConnell, that you are the arbiter of quality candidates? You see, in a real democracy or in a real republic where people vote for their representatives, like senators, the people are the people responsible for electing quality candidates, not you. You don't get to sit back and say, well, we're not going to support this person because we just don't think it's a quality candidate. Are you kidding me? The reason you're doing that is because you're trying to snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory, because you're a Republican. So the president is getting some help, and isn't that strange that the Republican Party would help the president of the United States in fending off a red wave for 2022? Isn't that strange? No, it's not. It's the swamp. So the takeaways. The president of the United States can crap on 74 million of his fellow citizens because he doesn't have to worry about having enough votes in the next election. Does that raise your eyebrows just a touch? Or did I get that wrong somehow? He can't run on his record. So what he's running on is how terrible everybody else is. And how they're just not up to the standards of the great democracy in which we live. Is that how he's going to win the election? So in other words, when you can't run on your record, you character assassinate everybody who disagrees with you. That is why the President of the United States is making the speeches he's making. He doesn't care how much damage he does to the United States. And what about all these extremists? These guys that write on social media that all the FBI agents should die. And so he's arrested and probably going to spend at least a significant portion, if not the rest of his life, in jail. So why do people like that do what they do? Because they're scared snotless. What are they scared of? They're scared of the Justice Department. They're scared of the Biden administration. They're scared of the secret police reading all of their social mail and finding themselves arrested. They're afraid. Some of them have made the decision that they'd rather die than live in the country that Joe Biden is trying to save the soul of tonight. Does any of this make any sense to you? If so, say so. 817-379-2172. If not, say so. 817-379-2172. Looks as plain as day to me, but maybe I'm just skewed somehow. Maybe I'm just a fascist. No. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. John David Wells at your service. The news, analysis, commentary, and debate. Debate 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. There's a chat room, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. By all means, go there and let me know what you think. A lot of people are saying, why is John David Wells dressed so fancy? Well, as it turns out, there's a guy running for Tarrant County judge named Tim O'Hare. I've known Tim for 15 years. He's a great man. And after the comedy of the COVID-19 response, having to do with crazy and arcane silliness on the part of county judges, some county judges through Texas, I'm somebody who believes in supporting the right people. You know, I've been talking about for years and years we have to stop electing politicians and start electing our neighbors. Well, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm trying to elect one of my neighbors. Tim's a great guy. He'll do a great job. He's awesome. So, that's what I'm doing. Normally, I dress a little more casually, polo shirts and the like, except on Fridays, which is tomorrow. It will be Fishing Shirt Friday. So, by all means, wear your fishing shirt when you listen to this broadcast. By the way, please support it if you will. Subscribe on the channel that you're watching. Ring the bell so you know when we're on the air. Pass it around to your friends. And if you'd like to support the show financially, go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. You can pledge $1 a month, $2, $5. I thought about putting a limit on how much you could put into it, but it would be very helpful. I'd like to keep doing this, and that's pretty much the only stumbling block that's out there. So let's talk a little bit more about the President of the United States and his speech tonight about how he's going to take 74 million Americans and turn them into fascists again. Karine Jean-Pierre is the mouthpiece for the president. She is the White House press secretary. She said this, quote, "The president thinks there is an extremist threat to our country, our democracy. The MAGA Republicans are the most energized part of the Republican Party. That is an extreme threat to our democracy, to our freedom, to our rights." So in other words, an energized part of the opposition party is a threat to democracy, our freedom, and our rights. No. No, that is called American politics. That is called constitutional citizenship. The MAGA Republicans, you know, the ones that want to make America great again. Because obviously the President of the United States does not want anything to do with people who want to make America great again. They want to demonize and dehumanize those people because they're the political opposition. And they have a real chance of getting it handed to them no matter what the Republican Party does to try to lose the election. They have a real good chance of getting thumped hard in 2022. So that pretty much says it. People that are enthused, people that are motivated, people that are willing to fight for what they see about a country that they want to make great again, somehow we're the enemy. Yeah. She added further that they just don't respect the rule of law and pursuing an agenda that takes away people's rights. Those are easy words to say, but they're really hard to prove. So how do you do it? You don't. You just turn it over to the mainstream media and they do it for you. An extremist threat to our democracy is not the issue. It is a threat, a patriotic political threat to your democracy, Ms. Jean-Pierre. Democracy, not democracy. Arguably, the Democrat Party in charge of the House, the Senate, and the presidency has done significant things to damage this nation. The President of the United States is willing to go out on stage and vilify half of the electorate. That's scorched earth. He's damaging the nation. It's just plain damage. It is not something that is anything that any of us should countenance. Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative alike, male, female, should have nothing to do with any of it. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights is what empowers Make America Great Again. So if we're such a great threat to this democracy, just exactly what empowers you, Mr. President, Ms. Karine Jean-Pierre? What motivates you? If you don't want to make America great again, what do you want to make America? No, we are a threat to the democracy, to their freedom to do whatever they choose with their neighbors, to redefine our rights to suit a political imperative. That's not a threat to democracy, our freedom, and our rights. It's a threat to democracy totalitarianism. I sure hope people are getting this. This is the Wells Report. Back with more next hour. Stay right there. Again, thanks very much for being with us today. It's a pleasure and privilege to have you. North to south, coast to coast, around the world, this is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. I report the news, the real news. We analyze the news for fact and bias and point out both. There is commentary and debate. That's the check and balance on the news, the analysis, and the commentary. A word about the commentary, it's just my opinion. It's not the news. If you want somebody that will stand in front of you and extol the virtues of their opinion as news, you have to watch everybody else. I don't do that here. You can take part in the debate. There's a chat room, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. You can also call me on the telephone at 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. So this is fascinating to me. Democrat New York Governor Kathy Hochul declared at an event celebrating the implementation of stricter gun laws. Remember, the Supreme Court of the United States just ruled against New York and their gun laws. I guess they didn't learn their lesson that time. So what they've done is they've implemented a whole bunch of new stricter gun laws. And she declared that the theory of a good guy with a gun stopping bad guys with guns is over in the Empire State. The whole concept this is a quote. The whole concept that a good guy with a gun will stop a bad guy with a gun doesn't hold up. The data bears this out. So that theory is over. Really? Huh. Her comments came amid the state rolling out new laws in response to the U.S. Supreme Court ruling earlier this year that New York's regulations on obtaining a concealed carry permit were unconstitutionally restrictive. The new laws took effect today, ban people from carrying firearms at most hospitals, restaurants, transit systems, Times Square, parks, schools, theaters, and other areas deemed sensitive locations. There are a couple of things about that. For example, there have been horrific shootings at hospitals, restaurants, transit systems, Times Square, parks, schools, theaters, and others deemed sensitive locations. So what the governor of New York is doing is creating kill zones. I wonder why she doesn't realize that. Oh. She goes on to say this: we don't need guns on our streets. We don't need people carrying guns in our subways. We don't need people carrying guns in our schools. We don't need people carrying in our places of worship. We don't need them carrying them into bars and restaurants because that only makes people less safe, unquote. Forgive me, have there been shootings at our schools? How about our places of worship? How about bars or restaurants? Would it be, say, for example, logical and maybe follow in something that is, somewhat at least worth consideration that this woman is talking through her hat? The governor said the legislation is in direct response to the Supreme Court's ruling in June, explaining the new laws are New York leaders telling SCOTUS justices, we're going to stand up and pass smart legislation. Smart legislation? The Supreme Court, with all this data, all this knowledge, with a law that was working just fine in our state, decided to take us backwards, possibly opening the door to more tragedies when people can carry guns concealed. She cited data that New York has fewer deaths by firearms per 100,000 populations than states with more lax gun law. We're not deterred. We didn't back down. We stood up and fought back. You doubled down on a Supreme Court ruling, denigrating the Supreme Court, denigrating the justices, and essentially denigrating the Constitution of the United States, and somehow she's still in office. The Second Amendment is the law of the land. They are rights that are the entire Bill of Rights, rights that are held by the people of the United States. And what she does is she quotes these statistics. Mark Twain. There are lies, damn lies, and then there are statistics. Well, I wonder whether or not those statistics hold up when, say, somebody, I don't know, opens up in a school. It's almost like she doesn't believe that anybody, just because she has made this edict, she doesn't believe that anybody would ever go against what she believes is the way it is. There aren't supposed to be guns in schools, places of worship, bars, restaurants, and therefore there won't be. So let me ask you this, Governor Hochul. Let's go to the Uvalde shooting. 19 people dead. Was the gunman violating your edict? Well, yes, he was. Did he care? No, he didn't. Who are the people that didn't violate his edict? Who are those people? Those are the people that died that day. Those are the people that didn't violate your edict. They did exactly what you think they should have done. And then you say the idea that a good guy with a gun takes out a bad guy with a gun and it's just over in New York? Really? Are you sure? I don't think so. Once again, this is my opinion. I don't think so. Because you belong to a political party that, regardless of whatever the president of the United States twisting himself into a pretzel saying that we are pro-police and we are pro-law and order, you are nothing close to it. Look at the crime stats in New York City. Look at the crime stats. What are you talking about? What you're doing is you're essentially setting people up to die in New York that otherwise wouldn't need to be dead in New York. That's not smart legislation. That's totalitarian legislation. All of the financial moves in the NYPD mean fewer police officers. All of the vilification of the officers of NYPD and everywhere else in the country have led to ambush slaughters of those police officers. We are not deterred. We stood up and fought back. With what? A potted plant? What'd you fight back with? The kids at Uvalde fought back what? With trying to direct the splatters coming from their bodies, the blood that came from their bodies into the eyes of the shooter, possibly blinding him for a second? Meantime, say for example, good guy with a gun in rooms 111 and 112 could have ended it right there. So, how about this? How about 11 times when a good guy with a gun stopped a bad guy, saving lives? How about that? What do you say about those things? In 2007, former cop and volunteer security worker Jian Assam saved the day at a New Life church, a house of worship. In Colorado Springs, Colorado, thousands of people were exiting from Sunday Mass as a shooter opened fire. Assam ran toward the line of fire, killing the shooter and saving countless lives. How about this one? How about Alton Nolan of Moore, Oklahoma, charged with first-degree murder in the gruesome beheading of a Vaughn's food worker? His rampage was halted by Mark Vaughn, a reserve sheriff's deputy and the company's chief operating officer, who used his personal firearm to shoot Nolan, wounding him. How about two gunmen in Garland, Texas, opening fire outside of a Prophet Muhammad cartoon drawing contest in 2015? The swift reaction by police and security at the event prevented all but the two attackers, from being killed. Some great shots, by the way. 2 shots. Boom, boom. Done. Good guy with a gun. How about a shooter opening fire at the Prince Middle School in Atlanta, Georgia? After wounding only one student, the suspect was disarmed by an armed guard who was stationed at the school. Good guy with a gun. Once again, our schools, where we don't need good guys with guns. An 18-year-old mother saved the life of herself and her baby in Blanchard, Oklahoma. A knife-wielding intruder was attempting to enter Sarah McKinley's mobile home shortly after her husband died of lung cancer. After breaking in, McKinley shot him, killing one suspect and scaring the other one off. Good guy with a gun. How about a 71-year-old man saved the lives of many at an internet cafe in Florida in 2012 when robbers entered the cafe with weapons? Samuel Williams pulled out his gun and scared off the suspects. Would that happen in New York? With these smart new gun laws? A 69-year-old grandmother protected herself in her home in Alabama in 2010 after hearing a burglar break into her house. Ethel Jones fired 3 shots, wounding and scaring off the intruder, who was later arrested by police. Good guy with a gun. How about a 14-year-old boy saving himself and his younger siblings after an armed intruder entered their home? After breaking into the home and pointing a gun at the 4, 12, and 8-year-olds, the 14-year-old fired, placing the intruder in the hospital and saving his family. That's a good kid with a gun. A pregnant mother of 2 saved herself and her children after 2 intruders entered her home in Ashtabula, Ohio. After refusing to let the 2 intruders in, they broke down her back door. As they proceeded up her stairs, she shot at them, hitting one intruder, scaring them both off until police arrived. A would-be robber was shot in 2006 by an employee at the Media Madhouse in Indiana. After the suspect entered the building holding a gun on an employee and demanding money, a second employee jumped into action and shot the suspect, saving both employees and customers. A 72-year-old person named Jan Cooper saved her life and the life of her 85-year-old World War II veteran husband, who was confined to a wheelchair. In 2013, a man was breaking into the Cooper's Southern California home when the grandmother fired 1 shot from a .357 Smith and Wesson revolver, scaring the burglar away. There are countless others. Every single one of those stories makes a liar out of Kathy Hochul. Kathy Hochul is busy making New York City, New York, the state, less safe. She talks about statistics. She says, well, the actual murder rate with guns is less than in states that have more liberal gun laws. Sure they do. But all these countless people, these good guys with guns, realize that what you're saying about defunding the police and essentially having no cash bail and doing all of these things makes them vulnerable to attack. You're not making New York more safe. You're making New York more kill zone friendly. These are the people that we elect. These are the people that we find running our nation. I dare say they're the wrong people. How about you? 817-379-2172. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Subscribe to this broadcast on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook. Please do. Make sure that you pass this along to your friends if you find value in this broadcast. I hope you do. If you want to support the show financially, please do. This is an independent agent of news. And it can sure use some support. Put your money where my mouth is. Support the report. Go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. Pledge $1 a month. $1 a month goes a long way around here. By the way, a lot of people have been commenting on my clothing today. Give you a better example. Let me give you a better look. See, this is I love this blazer. Anyway, that being said, should I dress like this all the time? What do you think? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Maybe 50 cents a month. Thank you very much, Ms. Yvonne. She says I look very handsome today. Well, thank you. Should I dress like this more often? Should I dress like this all the time? What do you think? No, I don't have TV hair or a TV face. Dress in whatever makes you comfortable, sir. The thing about togas is, gosh, they're so hard to iron. We've been looking at our schools lately. Math and reading scores for 9-year-olds in the U.S. fell between 2020 and 2022 by a level not seen in decades. CNN reports it's a foreboding sign of the state of American education 2 years after the COVID-19 pandemic. The results were part of a national assessment of educational progress long-term trend reading and math exams called the nation's report card, conducted by the National Center for Education Statistics. The exams were administered to age 9 students in early 2020 before the pandemic, and then again in early 2022. The average score in 2022 declined 5 points in reading, 7 points in math compared to 2020. And before you say it, no, I didn't take the test. I did not bring the entire curve down this time. U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona told CNN today the drop in scores was connected to a lack of in-person classroom education during the COVID-19 pandemic, and said the U.S. is in an education crisis. It's very alarming. It's disturbing, but it's not surprising. Keep in mind, a year and a half ago, half of our schools were not open for full-time learning. Why was that? Well, because the teachers' unions and the teachers who belong to the teachers' unions were afraid of contracting COVID-19 from the kids. And they also found a willing ally in the Biden administration, so they sent their union representatives to the CDC, and it worked. Because it's really more important that teachers don't get COVID-19 from kids than it is to actually educate kids. In-person learning is where we need to focus. We need to double down our efforts. I'm very concerned about those scores, and I know that we have the resources now. And we need to maintain the same level of urgency we had 2 years ago to get our students back into making sure that our students get support. That is not English. This is the first national report card to compare student achievement from before the pandemic to now. Peggy Carr, Commissioner of the National Education for Education Statistics, said in a statement, these are some of the largest declines we've observed in a single assessment cycle in 50 years. Half a century. There's more. I'll be sharing it with you in just a couple of moments. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for being a part of our broadcast. 817-379-2172. Call. The operator is waiting. It's me, in case you're wondering. You can join us on the chat room. I certainly hope you do. 817-379-2172 is where you get to interact on this news broadcast. It's the Wells Report. Back in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thank you for joining us today. Make sure you subscribe to this broadcast. Subscriptions are up. I was really impressed. Golly, the Facebook numbers look great. Now, if I can work on YouTube and some of the others, maybe we can actually make a go out of this. I certainly hope so. We're talking about our schools. Strangely enough, in the COVID era, school achievement scores have plummeted, is the word used by news reports from one end of the country to the other. Plummeted. Yeah, and there are all kinds of reasons for it. Get to that in just a couple of seconds. Peggy Carr is the commissioner of the National Center for Education Statistics. She said that this is the first national report to compare student achievement from before the pandemic to now. These are some of the largest declines we've observed in a single assessment cycle in 50 years of the NAEP program, said acting NCES Associate Commissioner Daniel McGrath. Students in 2022 are performing at a level last seen 2 decades ago. Students are already behind. Those students that were already behind struggled even more. Their math scores falling by up to 12 points and reading score declining by 10. COVID-19 disruptions may have exacerbated many of the challenges we're already facing. We know that students who struggle the most have fallen further behind than their peers. And then Mr. Carr points out that it's not just COVID. School shootings, violence, classroom disruptions are up. Teachers and staff vacancies, absenteeism, cyberbullying, and the students' use of mental health services. This information provides important context for the results we're seeing from this long-term trend assessment. Yeah, school shootings. So why is it possible for someone, a bad guy with a gun, to get into a school anywhere in the United States? Why is that possible? Well, that's a tough question, Mr. Wells. Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, why is that possible? What about violence and bullying and violence? Why is there violence in schools? Because the adults aren't running them. Why? It's not my job, man. My job is to not keep discipline in my classroom. It's the parents' job. All these people, all these years, decrying the fact that parents weren't involved in their kids' education. When they become involved in their kids' education, the FBI knocks on their door. Let's see what else. Classroom disruptions. Still out of control of the classroom. Why is that? And that bullying thing. Why is there any bullying? I'll tell you why. Because the odd duck that gets bullied turns into a political lever. You can't have odd ducks being bullied if there's no bullying. So there goes the political lever. Cyberbullying? Yeah, cyberbullying, yeah. Yeah, you got to be on a computer for that. Yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I worked really, really hard to keep Colton off the internet. Yeah, I downloaded encyclopedias, I downloaded reference material so that he could have basically an internet of his own. And then these educators started putting his homework online. Suddenly, he had to have an internet account. And just as suddenly, he became exposed to a world that I didn't want him to see. Too late. Too late. Teacher and staff vacancies. What do you mean, teacher and staff vacancies? I mean, what's that teachers union for? Hey, guys, your job is to teach kids. That's your job. Why aren't you? Well, because, I have lumbago. This, that, the other thing. And we simply cannot have, any of the so-called educators fill in for teachers that are sick. Educators, you say, John David? Yeah. Yeah, there used to be school administrators and teachers. Well, because of the teachers' unions, they're now educators. Those are people that really don't teach anybody. They just wander around and tell other people who are teaching kids what they're doing wrong. And oh, by the way, they tell the school administrators what they're doing wrong. In other words, they're basically jerks. And they're paid equal to or more than a teacher. It's just another layer of labor. Why is that? Why is that? And you'd think with all those extra eyes, they'd be able to do something about school violence and disruptions and bullying. Not so much. Math scores for Black and Hispanic children were lower than those of white children, the survey found. White students declining 5 points, Black students declining by 13 points, Hispanic students declining by 8 points. Obviously, the tests that they're giving are racist. And those entitled white kids, they're just racist too. That's why they're scoring higher. Am I missing something there too? Seriously, that's a serious question. Math scores fell across the country, 8 points in the Northeast, 9 points in the Midwest, 7 points in the South, 5 points in the West, according to the news release. Reading scores fell 7 points in the Northeast, 7 points in the Midwest, 6 points in the South. There was no measurable difference in reading in schools of the West. You know, that's because they've done so well in getting rid of carbon dioxide. Nothing to distract you from reading. Right. And then Miguel Cardona, the Secretary of Education, right there with what we need to do. He writes in USA Today, as Secretary of Education, I've traveled to 35 states and talked with countless students, families, and educators. In every conversation, it's clear the pandemic has had profound effects on our children and our youth. Why is that? Who closed those schools? Oh, that's right. The Biden administration. Well, no. It was the CDC, which is part of the Biden administration. The Biden administration did that. And Democrat big city mayors did that. And the teachers' unions did that. But Miguel Cardona is right there with the answer. The pandemic has profound impacts on our children and our youth. The latest data from the National Assessment of Education Progress concerns this, showing long-term trends for America's 9-year-olds in reading and math. And then, of course, it's time to talk a little bit about the politics from the Secretary of Education. From day one of this administration, President Joe Biden recognized these threats the pandemic would have on our students' academic progress. It's why he made it the Department of Education's top priority to get schools safely reopened for in-person learning and to get students back into classrooms if it's okay with the teachers' union and the CDC. We did, but we know it's not enough. That's also why under President Biden's American Rescue Plan, we directed over $130 billion in funding to school districts across the country to keep schools open and keep them accelerating student learning. How's that acceleration looking so far? By the way, was any of that money used to keep kids safe from being shot in their classrooms? Cardona goes on to say the data should serve as a further call to action for states, districts, and communities to use these funds quickly, effectively, and on strategies we know work. We must raise the bar for our students now. Use the resources we have to meet that bar. We must recognize this moment for the urgency it carries. Our students, the progress of our country, depend on it. So you threw money at it, so everything's okay, right? While we use this new data to help sharpen and focus our plans to accelerate student growth, we also know that many of our students are on track to make significant academic progress this year. See, once again, this is the statistics aspect of it. You see, the scores are down, so anything that happens after that the students' achievements go up, well, that's credited to the Biden administration. Yeah, sure it is. Recent data from the National Center for Education Statistics, which are not reflected in this week's NAEP results, show a substantial portion of students who were behind grade level in at least one subject last school year caught up in the summer for their summer break this year. At the beginning of the 2021-2022 school year, half the students were behind a grade level in at least one subject. According to school leaders, by the end of the school year, that percentage declined to 36%. Wow, 14%. Initial state assessment results in places like Indiana and Connecticut also show that many students made enough progress to close some of the pandemic-related achievement gaps. This progress is a testament to the enduring impacts our educators and school staffs can make on helping our students catch up both academically and developmentally. In red states and blue states, schools are putting relief funds to work, promoting student learning and following guidance from the department to invest in evidence-based efforts that have the greatest potential to boost student outcomes, like drag shows. We've seen places like Guilford County schools in North Carolina use millions of federal relief aid to provide nearly 67,000 hours of intensive tutoring to their students in the past year alone. In Kentucky, Jefferson County Public Schools are opening student support centers staffed by retired teachers who are committed to using their expertise to provide targeted support to students. These are all good things. These are all good things. One of the things that COVID can explain is the amazing amount of money that we throw at schools. Hundreds of billions of dollars every single year. And what we get out of that. We get kids that are prepared for college, that run to college and get themselves in deep financial debt, and at the end of it, can't get a job good enough to pay for their educations. What does that tell you about education in the United States? It tells you everything you need to know. People are getting out of university unprepared to move into any kind of useful endeavor. The CEO of a Fortune 500 company once said, I stopped looking at Ivy League resumes. Why would I want to hire a kid that is so easily aggrieved and doesn't know anything and still demands a six-figure salary? The answer is, I didn't take him to raise. So he looked around other places. Does the Ivy League care? No. No, most of the Ivy League schools have at least tens of billions of dollars in grants and donations and so on. Well, they're going to be able to keep their intellectually bankrupt garbage going for years and years and years. And what about the actual products of these universities? What are they doing with this nation? Apparently, they don't teach the Constitution, Bill of Rights, freedom and liberty in universities. They teach Marxism and craziness. I guess one of the most important absolute requirements of a college education is ego grooming. But it's okay. The Department of Education has got a good beat on things. Do they? By the way, where does the United States rank when it comes to kids around the world? Not anywhere close to the top. That's where. Yeah, the COVID closures sure come at a convenient time, don't they? They come at a convenient time. Because we can blame it on that, and we can blame it on school shootings. Again, I keep asking, why is it even possible for somebody with a gun to get into a school? Why is that? Especially when you consider all the wonderful legislation that has gone on. I mean, you can't carry a weapon within 200 feet of any school in the United States. So that solves the problem, right? It's really fascinating to me. What drives me absolutely up the wall? Well, we can't have teachers with guns. We can't have teachers with guns. Okay, how about a school that's secure enough so that kids can actually be safe and concentrate on their learning instead of worrying about some guy busting through the door and blowing their heads off? Well, it's inconvenient. Yes, the Uvalde Robb Elementary School. Yeah, they had security doors propped open. One of them was used by the shooter. Really? Yeah, really. Yeah, there's a lot wrong with this delay of education, courtesy of the COVID-19 pandemic. There really is. There are a lot of things we need to do, like notify everybody in the world that the idea that COVID-19 is going to damage your kid beyond recognition or repair was bunk from the beginning. Why did we close the schools? Well, because the teachers were worried about becoming infected. Is that unreasonable? No, not really. It isn't really unreasonable. Was it disastrous? The answer is yes. I'm finished with kids in school age, but I wouldn't put my kid in a public school these days for love nor money. Would you? This is the Wells Report. Back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. I'm holding my phone, which can only mean breaking news. This story is about 2 minutes old. A federal judge signaled today she remains open to granting former President Donald J. Trump's request to appoint an independent arbiter to go through documents the FBI seized from him last month, but then stopped short of making a final decision. After a nearly 2-hour hearing today, the judge Eileen Cannon of the Federal District Court for the Southern District of Florida reserved judgment on the question of whether to appoint a so-called special master in the case, saying she would issue a written order in due course. The language that she would issue a written order in due course seems that she is planning on issuing an order to appoint a special master. I hope so. It's the only fairness that President Trump is going to get out of this rather shall we say, dynamic seizure of presidential documents at his private residence. Notably, Judge Cannon did not direct the FBI to stop working with the files, which the Justice Department said have already undergone a preliminary review by enforcement officials. That's not what they said, actually. What they said was, this is New York Times copy, so you can understand whether the thing's missing. What they actually said was there was no need for a special master because they had gone through all the documents already. That's not a preliminary review. Judge Cannon, who was appointed by President Trump in 2020, also indicated she would unseal a more detailed list of the documents the FBI took during its August 8th search of Mar-a-Lago, Mr. Trump's private club and residence in Florida. She earlier ordered the Justice Department to provide the list to Mr. Trump's legal team at its request. It was not clear when it would become public. During the hearing, Judge Cannon pressed the government to explain what harm could come from appointing a special master. Jay Bratt, the head of the Justice Department's counterintelligence section, told her a special master could slow down the assessment of the risk and damage to national security being conducted by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. How? How could that be? As well as an assessment of whether the seized documents contain the sort of national security secrets whose unauthorized retention is a crime under the Espionage Act. Really? Really? Yeah. These were hard copies. They were in a storeroom in Mar-a-Lago. Mar-a-Lago guarded by the Secret Service. What kind of possible damage could they have done? And in order to nail somebody for espionage, there has to be espionage. You got to be able to find some sort of case that proves that Donald Trump was actually dealing the documents to other foreign powers. Otherwise, it's not espionage. We're dealing with over 300 records here that had classified markings on them, said Mr. Bratt. He is the government lawyer. That process has begun. The process needs to continue. Judge Cannon appeared to suggest that if she did appoint a special master, she would do so in a way that would not hinder the security risk assessment, which is easy. But for some reason, I really can't explain why, there may be a problem with the federal government being able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Very interesting. And so there you go. Let's see. That's wonderful. And I got a nice ad that I can't get rid of now. That's really annoying. Yeah, well, anyway, that's new. So there you go. So we'll see what happens next. I certainly hope that Judge Cannon does the right thing. It would be very, very nice if she actually did that right thing, being providing some form of fairness in this process, heretofore missing. So there you go. Finally, on the Wells Report, a Missouri school district has brought back corporal punishment. Yeah, which can include paddling and spanking. Paddling and spanking. What's the difference? I have spanked my kids with my hand. I guess that would be spanking. And I've never used a paddle on my kids. That would be paddling. I doubt very sincerely that a school district employee is going to use their hand on the rear end of a young miscreant kid, or possibly miscreant kid. So why wouldn't it just be paddling? Anyway, as it turns out, there is spanking still legal in over a dozen states. Yeah, if you have kids, you might want to live there. The latest federal data suggests tens of thousands of students were subjected to physical punishment in public schools as recently as 2018. You know, we just heard from the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, who said that, well, there's distractions in the classroom, disruptions. Maybe a good old-fashioned fanny warming would stop some of that. Of course, you can tell that I was horribly damaged by being spanked in school. I mean, I could barely string two sentences together. I'm so emotionally damaged. I have very little self-esteem. I really don't want to do anything to challenge authority of any kind. Yes, indeed. And I hope Eileen Kennan does appoint a special master. And I certainly hope she doesn't do what those green maniacs want to do, which is appoint an unleaded master. I'm going to go and help Tim O'Hare be elected the Tarrant County Judge, which is a county administrator, because he's a good man and he's one of my neighbors. Because I believe we should elect our neighbors instead of politicians. So I'm going to go do that. Until I see you tomorrow for Fishing Shirt Friday. Got it right this time. Have yourself a wonderful evening. Thanks for watching and listening to The Wells Report. And there you go. Darlings and wonderful people, thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate it. Let's see. Hold on a second here. Hold on a second here. It was, what I understand, there were security doors that were propped open, Max, and also doors that were unlocked. There's some ambiguity as to which door he used. But when they actually went to the school, there was a door that was propped open. So there you go, for whatever that's worth. All right, God bless all y'all. Take good care, and until tomorrow, Fishing Shirt Friday. Love one another and be safe.